lot of people in the room. Huh?
Then we should like send a message to like downstairs. And not the others downstairs.
Yes, I got told that if you go down the wrong stair,
Yeah.
This is the first session in this room.
I don't think so. There were probably yesterday. Powered by our own MCP service. Powered by time going on.
Oh, ah, kijk.
Ja, bon. Yeah, we're all marking your code. Ja, look, Marco. Yeah.
Dat is better than mine.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Please take a seat. Welcome to the RIPE DNS Working Group, first session on Wednesday morning. I'm glad you could find the side room. It was quite a challenge at times. I'm João Damas. I'm the outgoing co-chair of this working group. The other two current co-chairs are sitting here in the first row, Moritz and Willem. Excellent people to work with. Just a few words. Up there you can see the agenda that we'll go through today. There is, well, I would like to thank the RIPE NCC for having Anthony be the scribe here for us, and the transcribing people who will make these a lot easier, particularly with some speakers. As you may know, there was supposed to be, there has to be a change of chairs in this session, in this meeting. I'm outgoing. I was term limited. I'm done. I've been RIPE working group chair in one way or another for 20 years in a row. I think that's plenty enough. Someone new should come in. Hopefully you are all reading the mailing list. There were 3 candidates, all of them excellent, I think. And there was a request for input, and the chairs were reading through the mails. I think everyone will agree that there is a consensus that Doris Hauser should be the next co-chair. She's sitting over there, and she'll. Thank you very much for volunteering and keeping the things going. With that, and the part, Mr. What? No, that's for her.
No. Sorry, so I flew over here yesterday, and at the airport, a Piet, if you don't know what it means, it's a very colorfully dressed person with black strokes on his face. He handed me this and asked me to convey it to you. This, here you go. And I think you need to read this.
Out loud?
Yes.
Oh my God, we are going to run over time.
Oh yeah, but let's start again.
So which one goes first?
Yeah, the other one.
The other one. 29 November 2023, dear João, Sint. Okay, I forgot Sint class is coming up.
Yes.
So it's a Svarsby.
Yes.
Okay. Sint has been watching you work for a while, and from what I saw, I cannot help but smile. Oh. Because like me, you love to hand out presents by putting together programs with the most wonderful contents. Even the pandemic didn't stop you giving us these impressions when you organized the online DNS Working Group sessions together with some other people. Well, João, on behalf of our community, I'm very grateful for the job you have performed so faithful. Don't worry, João, with peace of mind, you may now stop. Moritz and Willem will take good care of Dodo to follow you up. Yours sincerely, St. Nicholas. Wow. Thank you very much. Excellent, thank you. I really appreciate that. First speaker up is Ed. Go for it.
Good morning. Thanks for finding the room. It took me a while to find it myself. So I'm going to talk about DNSSEC non-deployment, something that I've been concerned about, and kind of come with some ideas of what to do about it at this point. Well, I'm going to talk about how we got to be here and how we might go forward. So a little perspective, I'll start out with this, is that about 1990, there was a researcher who noticed that the DNS had a vulnerability involving cache poisoning, meaning that it was a very gullible protocol. It would believe anything it was told. And as a result, some wheels were set in motion, and from about in the early 90s, there were contracts and work in the IETF to develop DNSSEC. And that's the protocol initially, the basic protocol design happened about mid-90s in the time. In April 1st, 1998, there was a small meeting where the person who sponsored a lot of the work at the US government asked the people at ISC who produced the only name server at the time, Bind, and those of us who were doing the work, how come no one's using it yet? And that sorted out the entire DNSSEC deployment work for the past 25 years. We did a lot of work there, and after 25 years, look back on this, we haven't gotten very far in deployment. Now, the assumption then was that operators needed to be told the benefits of DNSSEC. They should just want to do this. It's great to have security. It should just be easy to adopt. So 25 years, I've been watching this stuff. I have lots of measurement data on its non-deployment. Then I started looking at RPKI, and I noticed that it too seemed to be lacking deployment, at least through for the past couple of years. It's picking up a bit now. So I thought maybe the problem hasn't been the operators all along. Maybe the operators are doing the right thing here by rejecting DNSSEC. Maybe DNSSEC has some flaws that should be addressed, or maybe in future protocols should be written with operators in mind. And so I began looking at this problem. This is what I'm going after these last couple of months. So in this slide deck here, I don't have solutions yet because I don't think I've had enough time to really study the operator side of the problem. The reason why I'm giving the talks is I want to talk to operators and try to dredge out reasons why DNSSEC is not deployed in places or other technologies, what's holding things back. But I have learned quite a bit in the past few months, so I'm going to try to bring some of that up here. Now, I'm starting out with deployment numbers as being my kicker. Deployment numbers isn't the goal. I don't want to see 100%. That's not the point. The point is I want a usable protocol. I want DNSSEC to be useful, to be rolled out there, to be put in play all the time. And with that, deployment numbers come afterwards. Now, and again, as I'm talking about this, I'm in a learning mode right now, still trying to start conversations about how to get out of this. Now, one of the things, the word operator is thrown around a lot, and I have to admit that I have this problem too. I think of operators as being one kind of operator out there, but there are a bunch. The DNS hosting operators, there are TLD operators out there, ISP operators, public DNS operators are out there, even individuals who do this just for themselves or just for a small group or just their company. So I want people to keep in mind that the word operator is a very far-flung meaning in anyone who touches DNS at this point, specifically DNS here, but it's actually wider than that for the internet. Now operators, I've run into some operators who, they are operators first, internet second, where they just run black boxes. They don't need to know what's in the box, they just need to make sure it works. That's a whole science to itself that we have to respect and understand what it is they're driven by. Now, there are some who are experts in the service they deploy, and that was kind of the problem with DNSSEC. The early operators in DNSSEC deployment were people who knew the protocol inside out. So what do operators want? They have two rules they go by. One is whatever it is they're running, keep it running, make sure it doesn't go down. Try to make it healthy, keep the capacity up, keep it refreshed. They're also, the second rule is that if it ever breaks, come back fast, as quickly as they can. Mean time to repair is a very important parameter. And those are the two things that operators look at in services or protocols or anything they're running. Now, operators do make changes. I mean, a lot of us have been led to believe that operators, once they roll something out, will never change it. That change is risk. But in operations land, change is necessary. They do tech refreshes. They do look at long-term trends out there. They're not going to stick with the same thing forever. They know that if they do that, it's going to be outmoded at some point. So part of keep it running means long-term maintenance. Now, but there are two things about changes that we have to keep in mind. They have two rules for changes. One, it has to improve things. It either has increased profit, increased revenue, increased service, increased value, whatever word you want to use for that. Or number two, or maybe also number two, decrease cost. So, revenue and cost are the two things that we're looking at here, benefit and cost. Now, they're operators looking at the service. They're not so much interested in how it's done. They're providing something to the outside. They have their customer, the operator's customer is generally the employer, could be the regulator that's put them into business service. It could be whatever business unit they're part of. The customers they handle are the people out there that rely on their services. So customers here, also an operator, they're in two directions, up and down. Now, DNS operators, we're in a field that's actually pretty young. There's only about 25 years of DNS operations. 25 years ago, when the first companies were incorporated to run DNS as a service. It's still an evolving area out there, and this is one reason why probably now is the time we're looking back and saying we want to do something. It's been 25 years of operators' angst, also, which is about the same time DNSSEC has been out there. And so we have a good reason now to look back and say we should take a look at what operators really want. Now, one of the, I've been asked over the years about DNSSEC, why it's so hard to operate. It's built on top of DNS, which is no joyride itself, and you all know that. DNS is an old protocol. It has lots of quirks to it. It's hard to understand. It's simple in some aspects. It gets very complicated quickly, and DNSSEC just amplifies that. So operational reality, the other factor I want to bring up that we often don't recognize is that the big thing about operations is the staff of people they hire to do this. They're going to have people at the terminal who come and go. These people may not stay for many years. They may be there for many years. They have to make training pretty quick. They have to be able to roll over staff pretty quick. So this is going to come down to some of the impacts of what I see later on protocols. The operators also report to service owners or service regulators. That's an important thing. They're going to look to the regulator or the owner of the service more than they're going to look at standards out there. They really want to make sure they make their customers, people that are paying their paychecks, happy. And operators also, they have a wide range of environments they exist in. They have so many different inputs to what they do that it's not just the technology or the protocol that we think is simple. They have to deal with all the regulatory things out there and reasons why they will or will not give up their zone file, for example. That came up yesterday in the talk. So what's going to make a protocol deployable? Well, I'm not exactly sure yet, but I have a few hints. One thing is simplicity. The protocol has got to be simple. We keep churning out protocols which are like Swiss Army knives is one adjective that's been given to me, where they do everything given the right set of configuration parameters. But that's not very helpful when you're in a panic situation. You have to get this thing to be done right. You want a tool that's very simple because you may not have had time to train the operator in the seat at the time things are happening. Clarity is also important. That make sure the situation exists as clear. Don't keep redefining things. We go back sometimes we redefine how records are read. That means you know how long ago was the software involved, how does it interpret the data going back and forth. And one statement that was given to me by an operator that was very interesting was complexity causes centralization. As much as people don't like centralized DNS, centralized services on the internet these days, a lot of times only a few can afford to actually run it correctly anymore because the protocol has gotten quite complex. So right now, these are sound bites, things to keep in mind. I'm not sure how we're going to put this into action, but these are things that I've been running across so far. And by the way, if you hear these things, you think I'm right about them, wrong about them, bring them up either the mic or to me afterwards in the discussions. Like I say, I'm really trying to learn and make sure I get a good compilation of these lessons. So back to DNSSEC, where did it go wrong? DNSSEC, I think the ideals were solid. It wants to secure things correctly. I'm not going to read all the words on the slide. I want to pick up the pace a bit. In the 1990s, we had a good understanding of the protocol. We understood digital signatures. We had a good idea of how to do scalable key distribution. And somehow all this has still gone horribly wrong. So what I looked at, and I want to talk about some time on this talk, is the 1990s network environment. Not as a nostalgia trip, but this is what we were solving for when we had DNSSEC on the operating table. I'm going to go through these individually. Host security was weak. That's a big one. Zone administrators ran everything. End-to-end networking was still everywhere. And network abuse was DOS, not DDoS. We hadn't encountered that yet. And then cryptography was just a much different environment back then, how we thought about it. So host security. We had very weak host security. Hosts were knocked over all the time. So because of that, there was a rule against ever having private key material on a host attached to the internet. If you look at the original DNSSEC specifications, we expected someone to sign the zone offline and transfer it magically across an air gap to the internet where it would be put on a name server and then spread out. Now, the first impact of that is that all of the answers DNSSEC gave out had to be pre-computed. And this is a term that I didn't realize was true until Daniel Kernberg reminded me last night that NSD had realized this. The NSD pre-computed all the answers when it sent them out. And that was because DNSSEC required that. Now, pre-computing answers is great if you have the answer you want to give out there. It's not so great if for a negative answer. And because of that, we've had NSEC and NSEC 3. Those two things came out directly from the fact that we had a pre-compute answers. Like, you could ask me a question and I don't know what the question is ahead of time, but if I don't have the answer, I have to have a way of proving to you I don't have it. And there's an amount of work to do that's crazy. It's not just a matter of, it's a matter of just putting the answer together. Like, how do we do it? First, we had to prove to you what we had. Here's what I do have. You can see it's not there. That's the zone walking issue right there. We had to arrange things in order. That causes a lot of problems in the name server. We had to put things in a heap of a tree internally instead of a hash table and so on. So what if we had online keys? We can see that commercial providers actually have online keys. They've been working. No one's had a problem with that yet. Tailored to the query responses would give us a new kind of a negative answer that could be much simpler than we have NSEC or NSEC 3. We could also improve the internal storage, kind of hinting at the tree versus hash table data structures. Now, zone administration was something else that was much different then. We assumed that whoever ran the zone ran everything. So we didn't have the notion of multi-signer. We don't have the notion of multiple providers of DNSSEC for a zone. That's had a lot of impact also. One thing I see today is that we're trying to put into DNSSEC the provisioning of DNSSEC. We want keys to go up and down the tree between the parent and child. And we're stuffing that into the DNS protocol because we didn't realize at the time we didn't have things like provisioning protocols coming down the pike. EPP, for example, was not yet invented when this was going on. In fact, Secure Dynamic Update, which I mentioned at the bottom of this slide here, also was defined just about the same time as DNSSEC. We could have probably made use of that for putting keys up and down. These weren't good ideas back then. So what if DNSSEC came after EPP? We might actually have shoved a lot of the complexity of key management into EPP, or made EPP more general than it is today, so that we could go up and down between registrar-registry protocol. It could be used between any two endpoints. End-to-end networking was threatened at the time. At the time, there's a big fear about firewalls. They were just coming online. In fact, we actually had a problem with that in my company where we started signing our responses, then the firewall of our sponsor kicked all of our data out for 2 days and no one knew about it. We went 2 days without hearing from our sponsor until they called us. And then we realized that DNSSEC was being kicked out because of a new thing called a firewall. We weren't worried about response size at the time. None of the engineers that we didn't conceive that would be our problem. The size of response is a big deal. Today, we talk about it all the time. What if we had started on the DNS stream-based protocol? We wouldn't worry about this so much. We designed for things like QUIC and so on. But then again, they didn't exist back then. We also didn't see that DDoS was going to become the big deal. DDoS was actually helped by DNSSEC, or initially the amplification attacks about 10 plus years ago. You ask a small question of the DNS and it comes back this huge whopping amount of data. That helped amplify all the things that are out there. We did not concern ourselves with response size even then until much recently we did the key rolls. Now, code availability for cryptography has also changed quite a bit over time. When we started DNSSEC, there were no public libraries available. There was SSL EAY. I don't know if anybody remembers that. Eric A. Young, I believe, was a person. He and another person eventually did OpenSSL at the late part of the 90s. We didn't have a standard library to put in there. We had to find whatever libraries were out there. We didn't think that all resolvers and all servers would have the same code for assigning and validation. HSMs did not exist in the DNS world at that time either. We had no concept of what they were. They came later. They weren't even part of the protocol design. They were for operators saying we wanted to have our keys protected. Patents were a big deal at the time. RSA was patent protected. I didn't get access to that code until just about a year before we started going larger scale in DNS distribution with the DNSSEC prototypes. It was enlightening though when it came on, because we were aware of multi-protocol situations, but we had no way to test it until late, and we found a lot of code paths had just gotten it wrong. We had to go back and do things. And there were legal restrictions back then too about export, which I will just lay out there. So with cryptography, cryptography is the one area that if we went back there and looked at it, what could we do about it? What if we knew that there were certain protocols that would be widespread? We didn't know that would happen. We thought people would pick protocols for each kind of data depending on what they wanted to do with the data. But what if we knew that operators say pick one and just go with one at a time? We didn't conceive of that in the DNS. We also didn't conceive of the idea that when you roll from one algorithm to the other, that there's some special things that have to happen. A lot of the protocol elements are actually silent about algorithm change, because we just didn't really think much about that life cycle of the operator. So what if we knew there was a basket of widely known, commonly available algorithms out there? Nowadays, they're talking about that. There's a proposal to make use of that. So things are going that way. So where do we go from here? So this comes back to recognizing that there have been a lot of calls for DNSSEC to be pushed aside because is it worth the money? Is it worth all the effort to do this stuff? So there's been a lot of effort to try to chip away at the issues out there. For example, child-parent provisioning right now, the DNS key, DS key, upload, download. We have the CDS, CDNS key proposals out there. It's in operations in some places, but not very many, frankly. About 5 operators are actually doing it at the TLD level. It hasn't gotten much beyond that. And there's some question, when it was asked to be spread to other places, there were questions about the completeness of the specification. And so we had to go back and what happens if your policy situation? How do you feedback errors into it? Multiple backend operators, that's another big one for major DNS consumers. Where they want to have more than one provider of services because they don't want to depend on any one. The DNS protocol now has so many rules saying everything's going to be coherent across everything that makes it hard to have more than one provider at a time. And moreover, it's also hard to change providers because of the same thing. When you change providers, you want to have the old incumbent be there for some amount of time and then bring on the new one and have them running before you switch. So you're going to have multi-provider there. We didn't even see that back then. Switching algorithms, I've mentioned that a couple times. We didn't have any way of dealing with changing the cryptographic algorithm out there. Right now, double signing is the proposal, and that means larger response sizes, things that we didn't anticipate in the original protocol. Now, the last two I threw in here to more recognition of operators. One is we have to figure out how to avoid DNSSEC mistakes. How many times have you heard that someone's rolled out a new DNSSEC deployment, and because the new zone is out there, the old data gets bottled up? Sometimes it's because you reconfigure the entire pipeline, you do a tech refresh in the whole pipeline, and your policies don't match up. It could be software bugs where software starts panicking when it doesn't see the right alignment of things. We don't have tools that let us look at the changes between zone 1 and zone 2. We didn't look at that as part of the things which should be considered as operational help here. And further, recovering from mistakes, the mean time to repair is something that I don't think we're spending much time on. We have negative trust anchors. That's about all we've ever done in that area. There's operators out there really want to be, operators are afraid of rolling out because if they make a mistake, how can they get out of it? That's the number 2. They can't debug or manage the time out because we haven't spent much time on recovery. How do we turn off DNSSEC when it's gone bad? So a couple of different ways to get there. I have some ideas. So first of all, we have to know where there is. I don't have a there in mind right now. I'm looking for help from the operations. I think we really need to hear from the operators as opposed to we, the protocol developers. We need to have some kind of requirements or goals to get there. I had a manager once say, if you don't have requirements, you don't know when to stop working. So when we hit the requirements, we can stop working on this. There is one path, which is tweaking current records, looking at things we have out there right now. And my argument against that is I get concerned is that as we take a record, you change its definition, you have to roll out new software to understand a new definition. Now the operator gets confused because was that record written by an old speaker or a new speaker, and what was their intent? It's not necessarily clear when you change the definition of records out there, even though it's easy to parse it, the parsing code's out there. It may not be that easy for operators to handle this. Now, creating new records and new code paths are things that we generally say will take forever to roll out. But I don't know that that's any slower than avoid. It's a better way to avoid confusion because it's all brand new. You know what's going on out there. We need a way to get from here to there, though. We need to know how to transition to the future. And DNSSEC doesn't have a real good transition mechanism. In fact, NSEC 3 was added a long time ago through the use of new algorithm numbers in the keys out there. If you remember that bit of history, that was the great algorithm role, the DNSSEC security algorithm role at one point. That's why we had algorithm 5 and 7, I think, are the same cryptography, but they are different meaning for NSEC records. So consideration, the IETF delivers documents describing protocols. These are the RFCs out there. We have to remember that the RFCs are good for software developers. They're not necessarily very helpful to operators. I had one operator say to me that a 70-page RFC is no help to the operations community. They're not going to write the code. They don't need to know the intricate details, but they want to know how to run what's out there. They want to have something which tells them what are the default values, what are the best values out there. In fact, one question I used to get was, which security algorithm should I use? When I talk about this to operator communities, I'll show a pie chart showing which ones are popular, because I don't know which is the best one to use, but I can tell you what other operators do. What this kind of points to is we don't have operational profiles. There's no DNSSEC operational profile. There's a guide to saying, yes, we have the standard specification for the protocol. There's everything over here, but what parameters should you actually stick to? What are the best default values out there? Right now, we rely on our software developers to do that for us by putting default values in what they distribute out to put on their open source software. Perhaps there's a need for the series out there for this, for DNSSEC. And I'll add one thing I didn't have here is that I've realized a while ago that most companies, we have project managers. They're the folks that put together a project looking at the technologists on one end and everybody else involved that's in the process together. We don't have that in the internet. We don't have a project manager for the internet. There's no one running this thing. That's the way the internet's built. That makes it difficult to coordinate long-term transitions from one to the other. So with that, I've run out of slides, but I'm still up here. That's the contact information, which I'll get back to. So I'm going to open up now, if chairs permit, for some questions and comments. And if we want to make up time, because João had to read all that congratulatory material, we can make that up too.
Therefore. Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Yes, hello, it's Rob Carolina with ISC, and this is going to be a very, very personal question, given my lack of subject matter expertise. But as I'm listening to your very good, very interesting talk about the history of DNSSEC, I'm sitting here wondering, what problem are you trying to solve with it? Or what problem are we trying to solve with it? And the reason I'm wondering that is we live in an era where I guess something like more than 95% of online traffic is going over TLS. So if the user community already has an authentication solution at the application layer, how many operators are going to want to take the significant investment in people, equipment, hassle, reduced response times, et cetera, to deploy another authentication protocol? What is this adding, or what problem are we now trying? I knew what problem you were trying to solve in the 1990s. I'm trying to figure out what problem are we trying to solve now.
Okay, so in terms of what we're trying to, in terms of what I think DNSSEC should be solving, let's get to that first. We want to have a secured computing base, ultimately. You'd like to have the DNS be secure for whatever the upper protocols are. There are those that want to use things for like DANE and other things that are not tied to the web. They want to be able to secure the DNS that way. That's the kind of sure. I hear promoters of other services wanting to have secure answers coming out of the DNS, regardless of whether it's for the web or not for the web.
I guess to follow up, I don't want to belabor it too much, but I hear that's a good explanation of what some members of the technological community would like to achieve. What I'm not hearing is what unfulfilled need at the end user level is being met as a result of this additional layer of security. I don't understand what's the long felt want, what's the huge desire coming up. I know why TLS is wildly successful. I don't understand what's going to drive people to want this.
Yeah, I'll give you a short answer, which may not be complete, but just make it quick. DNSSEC is like seatbelts in a car to me. And then most people don't use seatbelts because they want to, but you know they'll save your life if there's an accident. DNSSEC is just not going to have an end user value that's obvious. I'll put it that way. And we can talk about this more later, but I'm mindful of time.
Okay, thanks. Next up, I think, is Lehman Online. I'll let Lehman, Peter, and then Jim, and that will be that.
Sorry, am I being heard here? I don't really see an unmute button anywhere.
We can hear you.
Okay, excellent. There you go. Right. So thank you, Ed. This was a very good and interesting presentation. I'm sorry I'm not with you. I got a stroke of COVID. I've recovered now, but it doesn't make sense to go down to Rome this late in the process. So I will have to talk from here instead. I think much of what you say is very spot on. I would like to caution a little about involving EPP in the DNSSEC circus, because I think that I think that that's adding another Swiss Army knife to the one we already have, and that's not going to simplify things. And what I hear you, a gist of what I hear you about is simplification. The mean time to repair, I believe, is a very important part of what you're looking at here. But in order to repair something, you need to understand the thing that you're going to repair. So we do have a large challenge with education. And the other approach to that is to make it more black box. And I will compare, which I sometimes do, with motor cars, where in the 1920s you'd had to carry your own toolbox to repair your car. But today, if your car breaks down, you just call for service and someone will come and rescue you on the highway there. So maybe that's the future for the DNS as well. We will have a number of you know, tow trucks that are, and the problem is, how long does it take the tow truck to arrive at the point where the DNS service is needed? Just a prophecy for the future, but you cannot repair something that you don't understand how it works. So this is a challenge and the balance that needs to be struck. Thank you.
Thank you. Shall we get Peter quickly in? And Peter, if you can be brief, that would be nice. Or if Peter is taking some time to switch, let's go with Jim first, and then.
Jim Reid, freelance consultant, DNSSEC cynic. Ed, I think you've given a good description of some of the bad decisions and things that we didn't really think out properly when the protocol was being developed over so many years. But there's a much more fundamental problem I think we've got here, is that the economic incentives for deploying DNSSEC are completely perverse. You get no benefit from signing your zones, everybody else does. You get no benefit from validating, everybody else does. So I think that the business case for deploying it is very, very hard to make, because you've got costs, you've got no clear benefits, and in some cases you're adding new risks to your enterprise, which wouldn't otherwise be there. And I think that's one of the major failures of DNSSEC, and I think that's probably why we see we've only got 2 or 3 of the really busiest internet websites sitting behind secure DNS. And that's not changed a lot in the last 10 years or so. And it would be good to try and get some information from the operators of things like CNN.com, Amazon.com, and so on, to find out why they've not deployed DNSSEC when it's been around for so long. And the second consideration, I think, in the IETF terms is we've still got all these little tweaks and things going on, and let's make another little tweak in the DNSSEC protocol. Maybe that's the thing that will drive deployment. But in actual fact, in my view, it's actually hindering deployment, because a lot of people will look at this and thinking, hang on a second, this stuff still isn't quite stable enough. So let's not make a decision about deploying it yet.
Yeah, that's a pretty good summary. It's fair. The lack of business case, I mean, I think that's why we got to where we are. You can't make a business case. There's no business case for using a seatbelt, right? And trying to figure out what's going on here. I think that what I'm trying to do now is tease out whether or not this protocol could have been an easier decision to make to deploy, technology-wise, than opposed to trying to answer the business case right now.
Okay.
So.
Cheers, Ed.
Okay, Peter is online now.
Hello, is the audio working?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Peter Hessler. I've been running DNS for myself for 20-ish years, and I've been working in operations for most of my career, often for smaller companies that have very few resources. And in many companies, I've been the only person who knows what a computer is, let alone can do anything with DNS. One of the issues that I've seen many times is my zones are entirely in text files that are served by bind or NSD or pick your favorite, and they're static zones. They don't change very often, maybe once every 2-3 years. And so doing DNSSEC on top of that is quite complicated because you don't have a database to keep your new DNSSEC information in there signed. Also, at a lot of places, it's been your authoritative servers are often, even somewhat recently, are still a zone file on each authoritative server that you have edited manually. And of course, doing DNSSEC there is painful. The other issue is that there is often zero access to the registrar from me. That is owned by the CFO, and the CFO doesn't understand what DNSSEC is and doesn't care. Signed up for it once, they pay the bill every year, and that's it. So I want to add this operator perspective.
Yeah, thanks for that. That's very true. The lack of that perspective, I mean, going back 20 years ago, none of that existed. And that's why we have the issue today. And I'm trying to bring it up, like, let's be aware of why we have this. We've actually come up with an entire way to run the DNS based on what we thought DNS was in 2000. And I think we need to recognize the scaling from what your experience to the major players, put it that way. And I think we have to come up with a scalable way to do that. So.
Yeah, okay, thanks. I think these were all good points, Ed, by the way. I mean, Roberts and other people's. If you remember, what we have now is the second version of DNSSEC, because the first one was theoretically perfect, and then completely undeployable, even for us technical people.
Yeah.
So
yeah, actually, the current version is the third version.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, that's for trivia buffs only.
Yeah, exactly. So thank you very much.
Okay, sure.
So I guess as a sort of follow-up to this one, we'll have Dale come up talk about a new idea on how to change DNS.
Hi, I actually have a couple responses for both Robert and Jim, but I will not usurp my time at the microphone to diverge on that, trying to keep back on schedule. And also, as João just said, if you hear people referring to Tail and you don't know me already, that is also my nickname, so that's me. Given name, David Lawrence, and it is lovely to see you all this morning. And how does this cure work? Just hit the middle button. Okay, I was looking for directions. Nope. Oh, now there we go. Okay, so legend has it that the internet is built on the back of a turtle. And when you're trying to resolve a domain name, that turtle will give you the name of the next turtle down in the stack to ask for more information about it. And he will in turn refer you to another name, and it's turtles all the way down. But what if the turtle could tell you something more about the name that it's giving you, that in fact it's not another turtle you have to talk to, but perhaps it's a tiger, some other way of resolving the rest of your domain name. So this is where the new proposed DELEG record type comes in. And that's it, and thank you for this talk. I want to go back though to clarify something about the metaphor. I wasn't particularly fond of what the turtle versus tiger implied, because in fact the domain name system has been tremendously successful. It's fast, it's efficient, it's highly resilient. But if I had built a metaphor around cockroaches, that probably would not have gone over as well. So a brief history, very brief, of most recent events that how we got here. Petr Spacek had suggested that at the last IETF hackathon just a couple of weeks ago that we get together and discuss what our big wishes were for the DNS. If we were unconstrained about the current protocol, how could we move forward with addressing everything from niggling issues, like if an RR set should only have one TTL, why do we have the TTL in every single RR? To bigger things like how can we scale transport to be able to handle millions of zones. So a lot of, you may have heard your business executives calling this a big, hairy, audacious goal, or a BHAG. And when we started thinking about this, it quickly kind of coalesced around the idea that, well, if we're going to get anybody to really talk this new way we imagine of doing things, how do we get them over there? And we also realize that if something like that is going to succeed, you can't have something like a flag day, you can't have something like a separate, completely parallel protocol that you just expect people to be able to switch over to through serendipity. But you needed a way to basically get the new stuff out there without disrupting the legacy DNS in a way that resolvers could kind of serendipitously discover it on their own without having to do extra work to find it. So that's how we came up with DELEG. It turns out somebody else had already come up with DELEG. Tim April had actually, early on in the pandemic, posted a proposal for how we could do this, essentially leverage the service binding record, which had just was in the process of being standardized at the time and was clearly on track to getting its RFC. He wanted essentially to take the ideas behind service binding and turn it into how do we have additional information at the delegation that could indicate attributes of the resolver that you're trying, the authoritative server that you're trying to be directed to. And so this is just an example because we're still actually working on the draft to get it out to DNSOP. But this is the basic idea of how a DELEG record would work. You can see, we'll skip over that one in the record right then, the start of the R data, but it gives the name of another server you're supposed to talk to, and you can get that address in a number of different ways, but including here, you would see how it could use the glue if it were an invalid name. So, some of the very important features of DELEG. Top of the list is opportunistic discovery. As you can see in that previous sample output, that the DELEG record, we expect to be able to be handed back right in the normal delegation with the NS record and the DS record. And so a modern resolver that recognizes DELEG would be able to just use that information. Older resolvers that don't are believed to, and I'll get back to this later, but are believed to just ignore that extra unknown record type. And that's what makes it transparent to the legacy resolvers. It's also extensible with key value pairs. The service binding record format has these service params that are a service param key and a service param value encoded in binary format in the R data. It's also a parent side only record. This was a key feature both of Tim April's original proposal, and also I wanted to mention that Joe Abley had been thinking of very similar issues in a draft that he presented for essentially making just a parent side only NS record, but that retained all the semantics of the original NS record. We also are pretty confident that this would only have minimal implementation needs for authority servers because there's not going to be any special or additional section processing. You don't have to look at the record for glue. Basically, all you have to do is accept the new RR type in your authoritative zone. And one of the other big features, if you are familiar with the service binding record, it has something called alias mode, which allows you to say, for this host name, I want you to actually look at this other record that describes all the attributes you need to know in order to process your ongoing resolution and handling of this. And finally, we would also continue to allow legacy DNS and subdelegations. That is, say you did get diverted from a turtle to a tiger, you could still come back to a turtle further down in the hierarchy. So that indirection piece is like service B's alias mode. It is a special priority of 0. That was the 1 in the previous example. There's still some debate going on about whether we even need priorities, but at the moment, we're using the same format as service binding record. And a 0 is a special value. that says, if you're going to be resolving this name, I want you to go ahead and talk to this other, find out the information from this other name. Notably, this allows some of the operator indirection problems to be solved, where we currently, many commercial operators, for example, rely on customers to have to interact with their registrar in order to get new DS data published in the registry. And so one of the big things is that we'd be able to leverage this to continue to build your chain of trust, but using the operator's DS so that they can be in charge of just having to roll that one DS. Notably also, it allows for alternative transports, including operators. Say you're an operator and you've been, you've had DO 53 all this time, and now you want to support DOT or DOC. Right now, there's no good way for resolvers to know that they can talk to your servers. The resolver just doesn't know how to get to them. And so there are a couple of ways that this has gone about currently, one of which is through additional lookups for, say, DNS service binding records. Usually it's been done through out-of-band configuration. For example, famously, Firefox had a list of servers that it knew that it could talk DO to. But soon we'd be able to say in the DELEG record, oh, we want you to use this underlying transport type, ALPN application layer protocol, and here's the information you're going to need to know in order to connect to it. So one of the other problems we've had for a long time is we've specified these other protocols and seen ways that they could be pretty effective for addressing resolver to or client to resolver communications, but we've had a harder time securing the resolver to authorities path, and this would be a way to leverage that. So there were a lot of ideas in the BHAG list that we first brought to the hackathon. I think one of the big reasons it's starting to succeed now, this idea of how do we get unshackled from all the existing constraints, was that we had a critical mass of people that, even though a couple of people had kind of ideas before, we finally got enough people sitting down at a table that said, we really should be able to do this. And so there was a lot of excitement and energy around that. And so now you can do things like, if you had DELEG deployed and in the network, and a way to leverage it, you could, in this example, say, talk DNS protocol version 2, and it might have a brand new wire format. You could have better zone synchronization for extremely large zones or very large lists of zones. And one of the big things that I want to say to Ed and to Robert, separate from some of the other comments, but imagine a fully secured DNS push. You could have example.net tell you about names in example.com by sending it all the records that it needs. When they resolve www.example.net, you say, oh, you know what? I bet you're going to want the images host name too, because you're visiting that website. Now you have a push that all of the DNSSEC signed records are fully verifiable and coming right from your DNS server that knows the usage patterns and what to expect. So the proposal is not out just yet. It has been actively worked on. As I said, IETF just happened a couple of weeks ago, and unfortunately, one of the co-authors got back and was sick, and then American Thanksgiving happened, but we're really close to finally having this out into the IETF draft repository. Currently, it is split up into 3 separate documents. The core definition, which basically was that very first record. Transport would be the one that specifies how to use DOT and DOC and other ALPNs. And then the DNSSEC draft would be the one that describes how you can maintain your secure DNSSEC chain through an operator's DS. We're also going to need an EPP draft because, as mentioned, we do expect that there's going to, in order to get acceptable deployment levels, the parents have to implement it. And so that's going to fall on registrars and then registries to actually accept the data for publication in the zone. As I said, there was a lot of energy about it. I think we finally hit that critical mass that's going to move this idea forward. Many people have observed that we've talked about DNS v2 for 25 years and it never really got off the ground. And I think this is providing the path that a number of people, if you look through that list, you'll see registries are represented, registrars, operators, implementers, people from across the DNS community are really interesting. And then also what I found really encouraging as I brought up this idea to people outside the immediate DNS community, for example, web folks, they also are like, you know, this could actually be really helpful to us. So I don't know what is about to happen here, but I will say that at least walking around the halls of the IETF, there was a lot of positive feedback of, yes, please pursue this. This sounds like it's going to be for the betterment of all. But we do need to still test and discuss things. Like I mentioned, that legacy resolvers should just ignore an unknown record type. We know that's true about a couple of them, or we believe it to be true based on implementer assertions, but we haven't actually tested them, and we definitely haven't tested some of the implementations that were not represented by other people. And also, if this DELEG record is in process and say an alternative DNSSEC path, for example, how would existing forwarders and validators handle it? Right now, because of the way transport got split out into a separate document, the DO53, that is DNS over conventional UDP legacy DNS, is not explicitly indicated in the DELEG record. It is just assumed if you don't have another transport mechanism specified. There's still some ongoing debate about whether DO53 should be explicit. Also, based on our testing, would there be any conditions for which we would return DELEG or not? Like, do we just unconditionally return it in all delegations? That doesn't seem wise, especially for any legacy DNS resolvers that are still actually using just a UDP 512 packet limit. And so maybe we require it only if we're pretty sure that we're talking to at least a modern enough resolver that it asks for an eDNS buffer size that's a little bit bigger. And then, of course, we'd have other conditions of which DELEG probably should always be returned, even, you know, despite those conditions. And also then another topic of ongoing debate internally has been, well, do we allow side delegations or not? Currently, a lateral delegation is not allowed in the DNS. You know, if COM tells you to talk to example.com servers over here, but then example.com servers give you a delegation to another server, you wouldn't like that. But this could be a way to offload into the alternative path if you are under one of those TLDs that is not yet providing support for it, and some TLDs are notorious for how long they take to deploy things. So for example, if you really wanted people to be able to use your dot server, how would you tell them to get to it if you were in one of these TLDs? I'm one of the advocates for we should have a way to sideload. There is some argument about, well, maybe this is not the best strategic choice right now, and so this is an ongoing discussion as well. And then, of course, we're going to have our usual bike shedding going on. Personally, I like blue. Oh, so when I made my slides in Google Slides, I had marked this one as skip, but apparently when you export to PDF, it shows up anyway. But as long as we're here, I might as well say it. So I have some young kids at home, and you know, we like to play the Y game sometimes, and you can see that the Y game usually ends in nonsense because you just end at a path of Ys that you really can't go anywhere else. But this was still kind of true, and this is why I wrote the slide originally. It's like, so why are we doing this? Well, because we are trying to make the internet work better for everybody. One of the things I, again, want to say about the success of the DNS is many of the people here that are in the room have worked on it for years to make it the fast, efficient, resilient system that it is. And hundreds of millions of people every day use the work that you do. And all we're trying to do with DELEG now is kind of pump it up to the next step to say, how can we keep growing on that path to make it even better for people? The jury is still out on whether the whole internet thing itself was really a good idea or not, but here we are. And, oh, right, Qs and comms.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
I think there is already a question, initial question online.
Thank you. Niall O'Reilly asks, is this a better idea than the MX records that we took so much trouble to chase out of the XX TLD zones?
The which records?
MX.
I
I'm
guess
confused by
he's
the question.
traumatized about the old years ago. People used to put MX records in the
parents.
In the TLD zones.
Right, yeah.
And that made for a lot of headaches.
Right. Well, and again, so as I mentioned, one of the big things that came up in the big wish list of the brainstorming originally was we really wanted to have separate NS records, a different parent-child relationship. The same record set, RR set, the same type of RSF being in both the parent and the child led to a lot of problems, as with these other situations. DELEG, by being only a parent-side record like DS, should avoid a lot of those problems that had plagued previous efforts to put records in the parent.
My slide is only small. I see the need for this.
Yeah.
I think the idea is good, but we were just discussing about Swiss Army knives,
right.
And there is other records that have come part of the DNS recently, like SBCD, that also seem like a little bit of a Swiss Army knife. You can configure so many different parameters
right.
in it that it can mean a whole lot of different things. And I wonder if that's also a consideration you need to keep in mind.
It is. One of the slightly limiting factors on that is it's not completely arbitrary. There is a service binding parameters registry, which indicates what the values are. And the service binding document also specifies like how those parameters are meant to be interpreted. So it's a numeric registry, it has a text representation, right? But you are kind of limited, at least by having to go through some kind of process to at least hit the registry. It's not just anybody can throw anything in there. And
yeah, absolutely, not a text record.
Yeah, right.
Eric
Ving, Cisco, and hi David. Nice to see you in Europe once.
My AD.
Yeah, indeed. I was shocked about the ADD stuff, right? Anyway, two questions, and basically there's more about curiosity, really, because I like the idea. One, it seems a so big effort. Does it deserve a BOF and a working group, do you think, in the IETF?
So our original belief is that, and we'll see, but we have talked to the 3 co-chairs of DNSOP already. They are well aware of this. In fact, the one thing I didn't link yet, because we're hoping to move discussion to DNSOP, but we have a channel on DNSORG's Mattermost that has some, I don't know, 4 or 5 dozen people in it at this point from all across the DNS discipline. And, but in talking with Suzanne, Tim, and Benno, the initial sentiment is not completely solidified, but it seems like there's a decent chance that we could get DELEG through DNSOP. But then the much bigger job of pursuing the BHAGs would probably then warrant a BOF. And there are already some people working on, for example, alternative wire formats. But I think really pursuing it, DNSOP has a lot on its plate, and this is a big enough effort that we're probably going to be searching for a separate working group for it.
Okay, and now another question, more detailed. When you give out information to the legacy NS and A and Quad A records and DELEG, what will happen if the information given is different?
So that's actually one of the considerations that's considered a feature. For example, you could give dot addresses that are completely separate from your legacy DNS addresses. You know, you can build, the operator can build separate infrastructure for pursuing them. So the glue records that might come through the regular legacy delegation are not expected to necessarily be consistent with those. There's a separate question, one of the other arguments about the, well, if you did provide offloading in the child and that record got desynchronized from the parent, you know, is that an issue? Because it has been an issue with NS record sets. My position is it doesn't really matter, right? But that's a discussion, an argument that take place further in DNSOP or wherever we finally land.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Till.
Yeah.
Shane on the Resolver task force, right? The best practice.
All right, good morning, everyone. I guess we're a little behind time, so I'll just get right in. My name is Shane Kerr. I work at IBM. I am the chair of the RIPE DNS Resolver Recommendations Task Force. And this is an update about the work that we've been doing for the past year or so. So very brief history about where this came from and why we're doing it. Public resolvers like Google 8.8.8.8, Quad 9, Cloudflare, these things were getting increasingly popular, more popular a few years ago. More and more people were using them for their DNS. All of these large services were based on companies that were outside of Europe, outside of the EU. This is probably a little bit worrying for regulators and government officials. If you have critical infrastructure, which is outside of the control of your regulation, it can be worrying. Maybe everything's fine, but if it's not, then it's not. So what did the EU decide to do about this? In very EU fashion, they decided to spend some money on a business. And what they did is they made an RFP, request for proposals, of someone to run a public resolver based in the EU, following all the EU things that we like privacy protections and respect for filtering and all these kind of things. So the RIPE community got wind of all this and decided that we didn't want anything to do with any of that stuff. But we do have a role and an important place to play in this whole idea. And so João agitated to create a task force. And the basic idea is what we can do is come up with a framework and come up with a list of recommendations for what we consider the right way to run a DNS resolver. And then once we have that, we can then encourage people to take this and set up either public resolvers, new ones, or I hope that wasn't me, set up new public resolvers, or maybe evaluate existing public resolvers based on this, or set up resolvers in a smaller scale, which is probably even better. Go back to the days when every ISP had a resolver, and let's keep doing that, but have it run in a way that provides the service that we would like people to have. Anyway, that was the history and why we created the task force and what our goals were. So what I'm going to do now is go through our draft document, which I sent to a few of the mailing lists. The DNS Working Group is the one where the discussion should have and feedback should happen. So we have a draft, and I'm going to go over some of the contents of that draft briefly here, and then talk about where we're at with it and what we want to do. So here's an example from the current draft. So this is how it would look basically, and we have a section which says what it's about, packet fragmentation avoidance, and then we have a recommendation which we try to be very clear. I make it in bold, so hopefully you can't miss it, which is you should be configured to avoid fragmentation, which sounds really good. And then we have a brief description of who that recommendation is for. Within the document, we target not only people running, as I mentioned, not only people running public resolvers, but also people running any resolver. And so some of the recommendations don't make sense for everyone. So that's why we specified that. And then we have a very brief discussion about the issue in general. In this case, it talks about the dangers of fragmentation. It can cause reduced service and all kinds of problems, and what you can do to minimize those problems very briefly. And then it gives a reference to a document which goes into a lot more detail. And the idea being that an operator can kind of look at this recommendation and say, okay, I need to check out how my service is configured with respect to this, and dig into it and spend a little more time. Now, as you see in this case, it's a draft. We're not even pointing to a best common practice document or anything like that. That's because we're trying to represent the state of the art, what really current operators are trying to have as their best thoughts for this stuff. So here's a different example. And this is a little bit less focused because we don't have nice bold points and say who it's for and things like that. Because in this case, the recommendation is about something that's not a very direct technical things that you can set. So in this case, it's talking about transparency. And in this specific context, it's about transparency reports. This is a kind of industry-wide best practice that's, I guess, about a decade or so old now, which are kind of explaining in a public way what interactions you've had with law enforcement people and things like that. RIPE NCC, for example, every year publishes a report about all the requests that they've gotten for legal actions and things like that. I think it's a really good idea. It's in the document, but it's a different kind of recommendation because it's a different kind of thing. So anyway, those are the style that just to give you a flavor of what the document looks like. So what's in it? What are the details about the document? Well, we've got a bit of framing text to help explain what the document's about for people that read it. The idea being that the document itself is kind of self-contained and it might get copied around and things like that. So I thought it'd be good to make sure that we have all this, so it's clear for people getting the document. Is this something I need to worry about? Does it matter for me? Things like that. So again, we explain who it's for and so on. It's not for everyone. If you're running an authoritative server, my company now, we spend most of our time running authoritative DNS. these recommendations don't really matter for us. That needs to be clear as well. That's in the document. We also spend a little bit of time saying what the document is not. And we'll talk about this a little bit at the end of my presentation here, hopefully, which is that it's not a simple checklist. Even that first recommendation that I showed, it basically has a lot of flexibility in how you can do this, right? It could be just very simple as saying, you must set the EDNS buffer size to 1,280 bytes or whatever it is, I don't know. 1,400 something? Anyway, but we don't do that. We give a little more leeway. So it's not something that you can use as a, you can't run a scanner on a service and say, have you met these requirements? That wasn't the goal, that wasn't the intention. We decided it was better to have a little more flexibility and move that sort of stuff out of scope. So that's kind of, that was the introduction and explanation text. And then we actually get into the specific recommendations. I'm going to go through each of these in great details, and I'll be taking questions later. No, I'm kidding. I'm just going to show you the list, and just to give a general idea. First section is about how you set up the systems and the networks, and how you make sure that you can handle the load, how you can make sure that your system doesn't go down, how you deal with security problems. Are certifications interesting for you? Things like that. And then we have a whole bunch of very specific, I call them DNS knobs that you can tweak. These are, DNS is a very old protocol. There's a whole bunch of different things you can do. People have tried to improve it in a lot of ways. And so we have a lot of things here. And as I mentioned before, we can see the fragmentation stuff. It point to a draft. Other things point to documentation, which is not even, never went far in standards making organizations at all, but are like quite commonly deployed and things like that. So it's all in there, and everything is up for discussion, but we think that things are pretty okay. We also have, and then we finally ended up with discussions about privacy, about logging, and in this case, it's not the technical aspects of, which port do I set my logging server up, and do I use TLS? It's about how long do I keep the logs, what information do I include in the logs, how do I comply with local regulations and things like that. So that's the context of that. Similar discussion for filtering and blocking. Basically, our recommendations for these are we try to move in the direction of user-focused information. So basically, don't filter unless you have to, don't log unless you have to, and things like that. And if you do have to filter, try to make it transparent, try to make it so that users can opt out. You may not have those abilities, laws may not allow it, regulators may not allow it, but if possible, we encourage you to do that. And yeah, we finally end up with a discussion about human rights considerations. Yeah. So that's the stuff that's in there. It's a lot of text. It's not a huge amount. If you're interested in this stuff, I encourage you to have a look, or if you think that maybe you're knowledgeable, also I encourage you. We've gotten a bit of feedback already, and I have a couple of slides here going over that. One observation was made that the document doesn't do anything to encourage people to run a resolver. And in fact, some people said maybe it's too much and it might discourage people from running a resolver. Like you have this huge, I have 15 pages of technical recommendations I have to implement. That sounds way too hard. I'm not going to bother. So we may need to add a section explaining why you should want a resolver, what the benefits are for you and for the rest of the world. Don't know. Another thing is we originally included a section on high availability, which got eliminated basically because I think we didn't actually discuss it very much. Maybe I guess possibly we need to add that back in. And as I mentioned earlier, we don't currently have a way to measure each of these recommendations. I'm not sure if we're going to actually implement that, but we need to at least take that feedback into account and respond to it. So we're going to have to discuss that as a task force. We have a little typo in one of our RFC numbers. We made a recommendation we made a suggestion that you don't have to have all 4 digits in IPv4 be the same. You don't have to have, 13.13.13.13. You don't have to, it's okay. But there was some feedback that actually you should do that because it's cool. And so I don't know, we're gonna have to figure that out. I suggest we discuss it tonight over a drink. Also, there's a suggestion that maybe we shouldn't require aggressive NSEC caching because it has limited utility and maybe it doesn't really help. Also, maybe we shouldn't be encouraging DNS cookies because similarly, it was an interesting technology, but maybe it doesn't actually help. There's a suggestion that we should just omit RPZ, which is a way to basically to transfer blocking and filtering information, and just leave it as a generic statement saying, you can block, figure it out. I don't know. These are all feedback. I officially I'm totally neutral on all of these right now. We haven't discussed it as a task force. That's the next step. So that is the next step. We are going to review the feedback. We have to figure out what to do with all of them. It means that there's going to be at least one more iteration on the document, a new version of it. Probably that will be the last one. I'm very eager to get this work done and move on with my life. And then the ultimate goal of the task force is, of course, to publish a RIPE document. And that will be something that once we have all of the feedback taken in and we're happy as a task force with it, we'll hand it over to RIPE NCC for edits and publication, and then it becomes a document. This is not a DNS Working Group document. This is not a RIPE community document. This is the task force goal, our responsibility to produce this. So we're asking for feedback, but it's not going to go through a policy development process or anything like that. We don't have to achieve consensus. I'm the chair. I can just say we're going to do it tomorrow. Not to say that we want feedback, we want information. I just want to make clear how the process is going to work. So after that, we have a big party, and then we have a document, and then what? So maybe for me, that's the most interesting thing to discuss here today. Well, the two things that I think we have to discuss today. First is the state of the document, getting it in good shape and finishing it up. The other thing is once the document is complete, which will hopefully be in a very few short weeks, what then? So as I said, the whole reason for this was because of this impetus from the EU and this discussion around public resolvers. Turns out, according to measurements, fewer people are now using public resolvers. I don't know if that's, I haven't looked at it too deeply. I basically trust those. Maybe this isn't a huge problem anymore. It's still super important to have this document, but we can go a lot of different ways. We as a RIPE community could then start to figure out how do we encourage people to run their own resolver service. We could figure out, we can come up with more operational documents that are more specific. We can consider training. We can consider interacting directly with friendly public resolver operators. Maybe we can engage Quad 9. I work at IBM since a few months now, who has a very close relationship with Quad 9. Maybe we can use that to kind of review their practices and both improve the recommendations and maybe improve the service. So we can go in different ways, and it's really up to the community to decide what the priority is and where we want to put our energy. So at that, what are our priorities and where do we want to put our energy?
Okay. Thank you, Shane. And thank you. Well,
sorry.
It is what it is. And thank you for actually making it happen because I couldn't. Is there any input to be had at this time?
Yeah, it's Tomasz, PCH. Can you please go back to your slide on the history slide? Because this is something which seems a little bit confusing to me. So for just the benefit of the audience, because you were saying that all based outside of the EU, actually Quad 9 is based in like Switzerland, which is again like looking for, if you are saying like EU like as a like region, or you were saying EU like the European Union. It can be, but you also mentioned like privacy, and actually Switzerland has like strong privacy protections. So I just wanted to highlight this part.
So I don't know, Quad 9 moved, right? When did were they originally based in the US and then they moved?
No, I don't know the exact date, but it was some time ago, yes.
It was some time ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and you were saying history, so this might be like, like some time ago, but I was just, I wanted to mention for the benefit of the audience.
So the initial reaction was to the EU.
Sorry, 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Sorry.
The original reaction was to this action by the EU, okay, not Switzerland. The fact of Quad 9 being in Switzerland kind of came up to see how far could the EU reach, because as you are aware, the fact that you were in Switzerland didn't prevent you from being sued in Germany for privacy-related access to the data. So does this extend further? Yes. In the end, this triggered the thought process, but the thought process is the goal of the document is to be generic, to be applied anywhere. It's a recommendation for public resolvers, not.
Yeah. No, just because it was mentioned like public resolvers and the EU and privacy, so I just wanted to.
Yeah.
No, that's fair.
History.
That's fair.
That's how it started. Only.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Hi, Jacques Kasic from .rs, Chile. I just wanted to give a comment. I don't have a question, and I support your work, and thank you for doing that. That's very important on all levels. If we talk about global public resolvers, that's done, and I believe there will be more of them to share it. Not only use Google, 50% of internet, and rest doing the other ones. It is important for ISPs because I've seen ISPs which does have wrongly configured resolvers, and it will help. I saw a lot of them doing validation on one server that they're pushing to the DHCP and do not validate on another one.
Yeah.
So there is no reason of doing that. And also, it is good you mentioned it is not checklist list, but is good list of recommendations that should be followed. So thank you, and I support your work.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you, Shane. I think we need to move on.
Yeah, sorry for being late. Please come and talk to me if you have ideas that you're too scared to share at the microphone here.
Yeah. So, as you might have noticed, we will definitely be running over the allocated time. So let's go with Tim Wicinski, co-chair of the IETF DNSOP, giving us a summary of what's going on at the IETF.
Yeah. Do you want to? Sorry, I've got to. Do you want to run the slides there, or shall I?
Yes, we'll run them from here.
Okay, cool. And I don't have many, and I'll sort of move things along. So, Tim Wicinski, sorry, let me put the cat down. He wanted to be held. We'll go to the next slide. So I co-chair DNSOP operations inside the IETF with Benno Override and Suzanne Wolf. Next slide.
Oh, apparently you have to do it here yourself, I'm told.
Oh, I have to. Oh, I have to do it. Oh, rock and roll. Okay, there we go. Okay, so you know us. We're the three co-chairs. You can't blame Benno and Suzanne for any of this talk. And as you know, the DNS never sits still, right? As you saw from David's talk earlier, always good stuff going on. So currently, DNSOP has 15 working group documents in various stages, and we've published 7 RFCs in the last 2 years. And it's a bunch of work, and people get sort of, I think, overwhelmed by it. And I tried to organize this talk based on how I view all the work, and I view it in different views. I use views in the very DNS-y kind of way. So from one sort of point of view is like the zone operators, right? It's like, what kind of RFCs, what kind of work are we doing that help zone operators, that help, or just implementers as well. Examples, catalog zones, which was recently published. Caching resolution failures is a big thing for operators. Things like the zone version, which is, putting an EDNS option in there to sort of like signal a version of the zone that I see zone operators kind of finding like, oh, this could be very useful. And then something like extended DNS errors, which has been out for a couple of years, but is just starting to gain traction. And a very good example of this is something, extended DNS errors, and you'll see this, is something that I see in different places. Like if you look at these different views, it doesn't show up, it's used by different groups, right? Implementers love this. Folks that run a lot of zones kind of care about this, and users care about this. That's a good way to. And just all the DNSSEC deployment. You heard Ed's talk. I got, Ed and I can sort of argue for hours about some of this stuff, but we've done a lot in DNSOP about how to make it more robust, how to deploy stuff, how to deploy DNSSEC in a more robust manner. A lot of it's either, doing multi-signer models, trying to work on automation, bootstrapping, the CDS consistency discussion, right, about the DS key, that sort of thing. Things about NSEC 3, or even aggressive NSEC TTL stuff that, is debatable, I guess is a good way to put it. This is a lot of stuff that I think it's really tried to sort of sharpen up the squishy parts of DNSSEC that Ed talked about. It's gotten a lot more sharper, a lot more, focused and robust. People are doing this stuff, and that's good. And that makes it, more easy to deploy. And then how do you scale stuff from an applications point of view? And this is stuff that I don't think DNS people think about. Things like domain verification techniques. Look at all those text records in the zone file, right? I'm a person that looks at a lot of data. I look at a lot of DNS data all the time. And I guess I care what goes in there, right? And it's interesting stuff, but I don't think like zone operators care, or people that implement stuff and people who sort of operate zones, they don't care so much as sort of the end, the app users or the end users. Service B, right? It's the big thing. I think that's really going to sort of take off in more places. I see a lot of use in that, and it's growing. Willem made a good point when we were talking last week. He didn't see a lot of folks using the encrypted client hello in Service B yet. And I think some of that's because that's still kind of churning down the pike, right? I think it's still slowly going, gaining traction sort of thing. And hopefully it will happen. Who knows? And this is where structured DNS errors from the end user's point of view, right? How do you sort of help, the structured DNS errors is like, oh, we're going to return JSON, right? When you get a DNS error, which kind of, it breaks my mind, but at the same point, I know how useful it is. So DNS people just, the more you think about it, if you're in enterprise situations, you sort of find this super interesting, is sort of the way to say it. It already happens today in enterprises. And another point of view, there's stuff in the root TLD operator's point of view that it doesn't interest folks that run DNS on a day-to-day basis, right? The zone digest stuff, dealing with priming queries or trust anchors, stuff like all the rollover stuff. It's very important, but folks that run DNS on a daily basis are kind of like, that's not our view. So they don't really sort of plug into that. Is a good way to view it. And then, we do work on updating and improving the standards, right? Terminology updates are happening all the time. Big discussions on glue, right? If you want to talk to me about glue, it's like we can go on for hours kind of thing. And of course, there's the DNSSEC BCP was basically taking those 3 DNSSEC documents from 20 years ago, Ed, 4034, 4035, 4036, and putting them together into one sort of BCP that people can reference. It's a lot of, I think, cleaning up, right? As we all say, there's been going around 25, 30 years, right? We've got to sort of clean up after ourselves. And we're seeing a lot of that. And it's not sexy work, but it's stuff we have to do, I guess is a good way to view it, right? And so that's just giving you sort of a overview of these sort of many views of like all the stuff we're doing in DNSOP. And instead of trying to look at all the stuff we're working on, I try to view it as, I put it in sort of almost like buckets, what different types of stuff that people focus on and people care about. And, instead of trying to sort of take it all in and overwhelm, it's a very good way of sort of approaching this. And so just trying to give you a heads up. And that's how I sort of view it when I do all this work. And I'm hoping that can help people, because I think some people see all the stuff we're doing and they're just like, oh, there's just way too much stuff going on, right? And yes, we do have a lot of stuff going on, but we also take in a bunch of stuff, and we are sort of the, Suzanne calls us the DNS dispatch of the IETF, right? Like we'll we welcome the delegation discussion, and we also feel that we will push to have like a, a BOF / working group, stuff, right, very quickly, as Eric pointed out. It's a very good way of sort of viewing it. So that's just, and I think there's even more. And then Willem had this great idea when we talked last week about doing fancy Venn diagrams, and of course I tried and I totally failed. So I really suck at all that. So I failed all of you for that. But that should get us back on track a little quickly. That was just my quick sort of update on what we're doing. Talk to us, talk to any of the chairs, track us down. Please, always willing to listen to what folks are doing, sort of thing. So.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you very much for that.
So, any questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm always kind of surprised because I remember there used to be 2 working groups related to DNS at the IETF, DNSX and DNSOPs.
Yep.
And one point came and someone said, okay, the DNS is done. Let's close DNSX and focus on the operations. And I think this was one of those hold my beer moments, because since then we have been rewriting the whole thing.
Yes. So Oliver told me that for years.
Yeah. So I don't see anyone going to the microphone here. I don't know if there are any questions online. I think this was more of a review, and there is homework to be done now. So thank you very much for providing the roadmap for that. Thank you, Tim. Our last talk today is Anand from the RIPE NCC on the RIPE NCC DNS update.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Anand from the RIPE NCC, and I'll be doing a brief update on some of our recent activities and incidents. So first, I would like to talk about our authoritative DNS cluster expansion. We've been talking about this for a while now, and unfortunately, we faced issues with hardware delivery. After COVID, there was a lot of delay and lag in receiving hardware because all the various companies were going through their own problems. But I'm happy to report that we finally did receive all the hardware for this earlier this year. And we are on the verge of adding a new site to this cluster. And this is going to be deployed in Tokyo alongside our K-root instance there. So hopefully by the start of next year, 2024, this site will be fully operational. Next, I'd like to talk about an incident we had just recently. I think most of you, if not all of you, will have noticed this and will have been affected by this because we broke our own zone, RIPE.net. And this happened on the 1st of November, mid-morning Netherlands time. And the issue was that most of the signatures in the zone had expired. And this was a very unfortunate case of being a perfect storm kind of situation. And it started with a human error, and somebody accidentally introduced a record with a TTL of 10 days instead of 1 day by adding an extra 0. And this then triggered the signer to spew errors and refuse to refresh the signatures. So, I mean, I believe that the signer should have, refreshed all the other signatures and ignored this particular one. But unfortunately, it failed to refresh signatures. And then our monitoring was monitoring only the SOA record and the signatures in there instead of every signature in the zone. And so the SOA record was being updated and being incrementally signed, but the rest of the signatures were not being refreshed. So we did not notice this until, it affected everyone and went public. So we fixed this, and we also published an incident report. And the link to this is here in the slide, so you can download the slides and click on this. This was also sent to the RIPE DNS Working Group mailing list, so you can also find it in the archives. And all the details are in there. So we, of course, want to prevent this kind of error in the future. And one of the things we've done is we've introduced more checks to prevent this particular human error. We have also been in discussion with the signer vendor, and we have asked them to modify their code. And of course, they have an opinion on how the signing should be done, and we as an operator have our view, so we had to come to some kind of, compromise. But they have a fix, and so hopefully this can be avoided in the future. And basically, they agree that they should continue signing and just log errors for specific records. And then we improved our monitoring by updating our checks. So we now transfer all the zones out of the signers and perform a full check on every record and every signature in there, and alert if signatures are, not being refreshed. The next thing I want to talk about is Zone Master. So Zone Master is software developed jointly by the Swedish registry and the French registry, and it is used for checking the correctness of DNS zones. And you can use this to check the correctness of zones that have already been deployed. And you can also use it for pre-delegation checks. So at RIPE NCC, we make use of Zone Master for doing pre-delegation checks on all reverse DNS delegation requests that come into the RIPE database via domain records. And Zone Master ships with a graphical user interface, and we expose this to our users as well. But we are now integrating the Zone Master user interface into RIPEstat, because we would like this to be, the one place that people go to for looking up information about their IP address space and related DNS. So if you go up to RIPEstat and you look at the top bar at the top, the search bar at the top, you can now actually type in reverse DNS zone in there. So I have an example, which is 14.0.193.enadder.arpa. And this will trigger a reverse DNS check using Zone Master, and the results are displayed. And if you look at where the arrow points, then it gives you a summary of any issues that might be found. If there are warnings or notices, that's usually okay. But if you notice errors or critical, then you should check your zone and see if there's anything that you need to fix in there. At some point early next year, we are going to deprecate the Zone Master native user interface and redirect users to RIPEstat, so that this will become the only interface for users to use the RIPE NCC instance of Zone Master. And finally, I want to talk briefly about software updates. So I mentioned at the last RIPE meeting that we are aiming to upgrade our DNS servers. We currently run CentOS 7, which is coming to end of life soon. And so we wanted to upgrade to Oracle Linux 9. And we have started this process, and we have already updated some DNS servers. A couple of things we had to do is to relax the default crypto policy on Oracle Linux 9, because it doesn't allow things like verification of SHA-1 digests and things like that. But we still need to do those verifications from time to time. And we noticed this when trying to use utilities like kZoneCheck, which is part of NotDNS. because when we fed it a zone, it choked on SHA-1 and Ghost digests. So we've spoken with the CZNIC people and they will fix this. And yeah, we're soon going to upgrade more of our servers after this RIPE meeting, and we hope that by the next time we meet in Krakow, most of our servers will have been updated. And with that, I come to the end of my presentation. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know. Thanks.
I believe Lehman is in the queue to ask a question or make a comment. Good. You're muted.
Sorry, too many buttons here. Hello, and thank you for the presentation. Are you using the default things for ZoneMaster? To me, ZoneMaster is a useful tool, but it's jam-packed with people's opinions rather than facts, because DNS is a minefield of opinions. So how should I phrase this? Does warnings prevent you from having your reverse zone delegated?
Thanks for that question. So yes, ZoneMaster comes in with certain opinions, as you say, about how DNS should be. We have deviated slightly from the default policy for a couple of things that our users felt were too strict. So we have overrides for those in the policy. And this is one of the nice things about ZoneMaster. You can override the default policy. So yeah, we're doing that. And what we do is that notices and warnings do not prevent reverse DNS delegation. So they're emitted and people should check for things, but we don't prevent. We only prevent delegation in case of errors or critical messages from ZoneMaster, because those actually mean that the zone might be broken or might not function properly.
That's a very fair state, I think. So thank you for doing that. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't currently see anyone else, so thank you very much for providing this update. And with that, we are done. Sorry for running a little bit over time. I think the idea really was to make sure that you didn't have to put up with the queue of initial people at the barista. See you in Krakow in May.
don't mind if you want to.
No, I just don't want to step on.
I can, no, that's.
I mean, but I mean, I suppose the thing is, if you're,
Yeah.
you know, it's no, there isn't. No. It was today. Okay, but it's okay. Might do a little bit of. Because we'll do that. I had this for a few years now. I have a mix of Dell and that. I use Windows for everything else. Actually, this particular. So yeah. The earliest possible moment gets. I mean, the MacBook is great as well. Like it wasn't some sort of.
No. You know, I was just like.
Problem I have is like a MacBook. MacBook is bad. Yeah, we'll be. Not doable for this week. I promised myself that. But
I'll get feedback. I've gotten an email. Because obviously I need to promote you to host. Okay, I reckon that's.
Hello. Good morning to you all, and welcome to the RIPE 87 session of the Anti-Abuse Working Group. My name is Brian Nisbet, and together with my co-chairs, Tobias Knecht in the room and Markus Brün online, we would like to welcome you all to this session. First off, I would like to thank all of the support people without whom we'd be standing in a room shouting at you and desperately hoping the people on the internet heard us. So to all the NCC support staff, the ops team, Meet Echo team, and of course, totally biased, but our wonderful stenographers. So thank you all very much for making all of this work and keeping it as a record for future times. I'd just like to remind everybody that RIPE community now has a code of conduct, and that's covered. This working group, the mailing list, the meetings, etc., are all covered by that. What other administrivia? Yes, you can rate what we're talking about in the the meeting system. You don't have to. This isn't the same as the plenary, but we do welcome your feedback, whether via the survey or just coming up and telling us later or whatever, because we want to, on the mailing list, whatever it is, want to make the session and the working group better for all of ye. The minutes from RIPE 86 were circulated some time ago. They have been on the website for some time. I am not aware of any issues with them. Unless somebody stands up and tells me about some issues with them now, we will consider them approved. Seeing nothing, we shall consider them approved. Thank you all very much. The agenda has been published again for about a month or so. Are there any items that anyone wishes to add to the agenda at this point in time? Keenly aware of what happened last time I asked this question in Rome, but we're in a very different world now. Nope. Okay, then we will proceed with the agenda as published. So, recent list discussion, the standing item. The co-chairs feel that the item a little bit further down in B around discussion and work item creation kind of covers, I think, the recent list discussion, because that touches on the abuse C piece, validation, ASNs, all of that jazz. So unless there is something again somebody would like to raise, then we will leave that kind of discussion to the section a little bit further down. And again, hearing nothing, we shall move on with an update from Gerardo, who is hopefully online somewhere. So there he is.
Yes. Hello.
Good morning. So yes. So would you like to tell us awesome things about the all of the work and the progress that has been happening? So I will hand over to your good self. From awareness to action, indeed.
Well, thank you. Good morning, Rome. This presentation is going to be a little bit different than what you're accustomed to. In the past, I was here to tell you about where we were in the development of the anti-abuse training. So today my presentation is going to take a little bit of a different direction. I want you guys to know about something, but I also want to know something from you. So this is going to be a two-way exchange, hopefully. So what has been going on in the past? This is a recap for all the people who might not know. In 2021, the working group requested the RIPE NCC to help in creating some anti-abuse training material. And the idea was to help new LARs who might not be aware about how to handle abuse reports to be able to do their duty as good netizens. So in 2022, we developed a webinar, and at the beginning of this year, 2023, we started delivering it. So far, we've only been able to deliver it twice. It's 2 interactive webinars, and we reached about 70 participants. So 70 people signed up and followed the webinar. The feedback from the attendees shows that the webinars are helping raise awareness of different abuse threats and in helping them to learn how to take action in handling abuse reports. And so let's talk about the current solution. Why did we choose for a webinar? Well, it's a more simple format, so it's faster to develop for us. Basically, it's developing a webinar structure with learning goals, and then training the trainers so that they can deliver it, and of course developing the slides. The thing about the webinar is that it also has a real-time Q&A format, which allows for discussion and getting feedback, or actually giving us feedback. It also has the opportunity to do some direct networking between the participants. And of course, the trainer will facilitate discussion. So the webinar allows to foster discussion amongst participants as well. Now, the problem with webinars, and as much as I like the webinar format, is it does have a little downside. Not everybody has time for these live webinar sessions because of time zone differences. Our service region is quite large, and not everybody has the time to sit an hour and a half to listen to us talk. The content will be only delivered once at that webinar, and so people who might want to do it at a different time cannot. And reaching a wider audience would require more live sessions and resources from the RIPE NCC. So what I'd like to talk about is maybe a suggestion for the future, and that is, of course, the e-learning format. And this is not to replace a webinar, but to complement it. It has some characteristics that solve some of the shortcomings of the webinar format. So, for example, self-paced learning, which allows people to take the training at their own time. Geographic barriers are removed because it's online and anybody can access it as long as they have access to the internet. The training experience is consistent, as the content will always remain the same, and it's self-paced, so people can do it at their own time. Analytics will allow us to track completion rates, so to know who completed what in the e-learning. And it also makes it scalable for training more people because it's more cost effective. It doesn't take as much resources to make. And of course, every time there's an update, all we have to do is update it centrally in the e-learning platform, and we don't have to have live sessions scheduled. So the benefits about the e-learning format is that it could allow us to sustain the momentum of the webinar training by offering a synchronous option that complements the benefits of the live training. This would help further the goal of empowering change on a larger scale. So, and here comes my question to you guys as a working group, and this is where I pass the ball over to you. We don't need to know this now, but we would really like to see the working group getting more involved and maybe starting a discussion about the direction the anti-abuse training should be taking. So thank you for your time and attention, and I am open for questions. No?
Cool. No, hang on. It just takes me a moment or two to get up from my seat. Sorry. So first off, thank you so much. And I mean, it's great to hear that obviously there's been a good response. Thoughts from anybody? You know, we were talking about trying to improve the ability to handle abuse. What do you, again, there is more time for feedback, but just having heard Gerardo's thoughts there, any feedback? Do we think we in fact need a 6-week intensive course in person in everybody's house, or, you know, and just one, I suppose one question from me, Gerardo, is it an instead of or along with?
Along with.
Okay, so the webinars would still be taking place on occasion.
So the idea of the webinars is to have this live interaction with the trainers and to be able to ask questions and to also be able to chat with each other during the webinar. Maybe express different opinions or share techniques. The e-learning would help the people who want to learn about the topic to be able to access this knowledge or these skills, techniques, whatever it is, at their own time, because that's why I said the difference between the webinar and the e-learning is mostly the time that people can access this training.
Okay, cool.
But also on the e-learning side, you could also make material that's not only for the network operators, but maybe for people who are users of the internet and they want to learn about how they can handle maybe some abuse situation. Hint, hint, mailing list discussion.
Indeed. I mean, that sounds like a very interesting thing. Oh.
Hello, I'm Moin. With all my hats off, I would like to speak of myself. I actually have had some experience previously working as a trainer in various parts of the different world. And I also have done it during the time of COVID, where it actually went from face-to-face training to webinars and online-based ones. But I think like there is one thing that actually misses while we are doing it in online, that is immersion. We cannot actually replace it. So that's the point I want to mention actually here.
Okay. Okay, cool. Anything else, folks? Or does the room feel generally this is a good direction to go in? You know, or does anybody violently object? I mean, I'm gonna take a certain amount of silence indicates consent at this point in time. So, as nobody is objecting, I mean, it would be nice if we had a bit more active participation, I will admit. The next section, which get your standing up to the mic boots ready for certainly the next section. But look, Gerardo, thank you. I think, yeah, let's go in this direction. I think that is a useful thing, and I think that there is absolutely conversation to be had about extending that. I mean, the e-learning towards users as well as operators.
Yeah, like I said, we don't need an answer right now. I would really like to see people maybe discussing the topic. So we'll see what happens on the mailing list after the meeting.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you very much. So I'm going to hand over to Tobias now. I'm going to sit down, Slack, something.
Perfect. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Gerardo. Hello, everybody, to Rome as well from my side. We, as the chairs of the working group, had a little bit of discussion over the last few months about how we're going to continue with the working group, if we want to do something else, if we want to do something different, and if we just want to, check different ways out and to get engagement and get work done. At the end of the day, it's called a working group. And so one of the ideas came then when we saw the recent list discussion, as Brian already said. This is a big part of the recent list discussion. There was a discussion about people not responding to emails that go to the abuse mailbox. And within that discussion, there was a lot of other discussions opening up, like the verification of abusee or validation of abusee, but also the ASN cleanup and so on and so forth. And so our idea is, and this is what we want to do from now on more, is we want to ask you as the community more for input about what do you think of abusive behavior that we should tackle as a working group. Because so far, every once in a while, something comes up on the mailing list, but we feel that there is always a lot of discussions, maybe also not on the mailing list, but also on RIPE meetings. And is there something that we could do, or is there something that somebody thinks there is something that should be done about? And so we would like to hear from you guys in the community. Then we're going to try to pull all the information together. This is what we did this time as well, which you will see in a few minutes. Pull all the information together on what's the status quo, where are we at the moment, and then start having a conversation and find people that want to push certain topics into the right direction, whatever these topics are. If this is going to go into a policy proposal, if this is going to go into conversations between you and RIPE NCC and the community, that RIPE NCC might not necessarily need a policy, or whatever it is, we just want to get more conversations and more discussions together. And so that's why I also sent an email the other week, 3 weeks ago, or even longer, about we prepared for this meeting. If you have inputs about the topics that were on the mailing list, please let's have that conversation and the discussion right after. And if we're not gonna, and if you're not gonna want to participate or have nothing, that means Brian and we need to make it a little bit more controversial, so that we're getting conversations. Maybe that's a path to go. But the three topics that we were talking about on the mailing list again was the abuse email ignored as the opener for that whole conversation. Abuse email address verification was one, and the ASN cleanup was the second one. So what we thought, as mentioned, we want to get the status quo, what's already happening in RIPE NCC. And so thank you to Marco, who will give us a presentation about what in these topics has already been done by RIPE NCC. So we have the right starting point to figure out if this is enough, or if we want to have more, or whatever the outcome is of that, and what you as a community think in that regard. So thank you for that. And Marco, please.
Morning, everybody. I see there's still a bit of problems with the slides. Let's have a look. I had to go back. Yeah, now it works. Okay, perfect. Good morning, everybody. Sorry for that little hiccup. Yeah, my name is Markus Schmidt, Manager of Registration Services. I'm here to present you a couple of data points that hopefully will be useful for you for the ongoing discussions. And as actually Tobias just mentioned, I plan to present here the status quo. Then I will actually leave the stage, because the idea is to have an open discussion. But I'm here together with my colleague Jeremy Walder. He's also mentioned there as one of the authors, and we're happy to participate in this actual discussion. But for now, allow me to show you a little bit how we currently do things. And yeah, I hope you find it useful. First off, about ABUC validation, there were quite some questions. Currently, the way how we do it, we are using an external verification tool. This tool does a couple of checks. It's check if the formatting is correct, if the DNS is well configured, if it responds to a ping, and so on. And this is completely non-intrusive. There's no email sent, and the holder of this Abusix contact is not impacted by it if everything works well. If this test fails, we go to the next phase. We send out an email with a verification link to that email to exclude some false positives. And also a ticket is created by the RIPE NCC to then follow up. It's first an automated process, and if this doesn't help, it becomes a manual process. Some numbers here. We have currently around 90,000 different Abusix contacts in the RIPE database, and they split in around 20,000 in LAR organization objects. So of our members, they have different accounts, and there must be a Abusix contact linked to it. We have another 58,000 abuse contacts in resource objects, which can be an allocation object, a sub-allocation, an assignment, and so on. And then we have another 15,000 abuse contacts in independent resource objects, AS numbers, and also PI assignments, IPv4 and IPv6. So if you divide this 90,000 emails that we have to verify annually, it's roughly 2,000 per week. And a lot of automated, and around 6 to 8% of those emails fail. That doesn't necessarily mean that they are not working. Sometimes it was just a timeout and next automated test worked, or the verification link is clicked and all is fine. But still, a couple of them really seems to be not working. And what we do in those cases, we contact them to verify it. And if for abuse contacts in resource objects or in independent resources, if we cannot get hold of the responsible person, we basically replace that email with a comment with the working abuse contact of the LAR or the sponsoring LAR, because they hold some responsibility for these resources as well. It's getting more workload impacting if it's a invalid abuse contact of an organization, an LAR organization, because then we have to do an investigation. It can be quite extensive. We look into it. Okay, did something happen to this company? Did it change name and did it change domains? Did it maybe went into liquidation, or is there something else going on? We email and we also try to call all contacts that we can find, that we have in our records, and also do some online research. And also, if the resources are announced, we get even in contact with the upstream provider to help them to get in contact with. If this all doesn't work and this member remains unresponsive, then the membership can be terminated. And I think it's important to point out it's of unresponsiveness. So it's not really a policy violation, it's just they are not responding to us for a long time, several months, and many different contact attempts. Now, a few facts about the current AS number cleanup. That's a project that started 2017 and is the idea to verify ASN numbers that doesn't seem to be in use anymore. Our parameters for this is that we don't see any registration change in the last 13 months. So there was no transfer, no issuing, no sponsorship change. And also it doesn't appear visible for at least 13 months. And then we do send an email to the LAR, and if it's an independent resource of an end user, to the sponsoring LAR. And once that LAR confirms, okay, we don't need it anymore, we don't need it anytime soon, we return this ASN. And so far we have contacted over 4,000 of these ASN holders. And as you see, the return rate is rather high. So it is more than the half. And that's it from my side. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marco, for preparing this. So this is the status quo about Abuse C verification or validation, and it's the status quo on what's happening with the ASN or with unused ASNs at the moment. I'm not sure if anybody that was on the mailing list and had this conversation or this discussion is now today in the room, but are there any questions? And Marco is happy to answer questions, but are there any questions about that, or any ideas or any things that need to be discussed from the community right now? Now the question is, did you prepare and do your homework?
And I'm just going to kind of add from my own point of view that, and I suppose this is the thing. This is a working group. This is not Brün and Tobias and Markus come up with all these things. We really, these things all came out, these policies, all of this stuff came out of work from the working group. And we would like, people are talking about issues, and it's not up to us and it's not up to the NCC, outside of us all being members of the community, to fix this or lead all of this. And I think it's really important that if people have issues, and I'm sure, I know Jordi is in address policy, and that clash isn't great this morning. He has ideas. Are there others? And we're not even saying if you stand up to the mic, you have to write a policy. It'd be great if you wanted to, as I pointed out to somebody on the unofficial Telegram chat the other day. Anyone can write a policy, but just input. Is this a problem? Is this something you'd like to see more done on? Do you have any ideas in this regard? Because if not, ain't nothing going to change. And we'll kind of sit here, and in 6 months' time, that'll happen. Or indeed, somebody will come along with a policy suggestion that you don't like. And maybe you'll react then, or maybe you won't. And I know, this is a small group of people. It's not about any of you as individuals. Please do not take it that way. But also, this is the opportunity for you to give input, as is the mailing list. So, or you're going to have a really long coffee break.
And also not only about the two topics that Marco talked about, I think the email or abuse email ignored. I think that's a topic that has been coming up over and over again, and maybe somebody has experience on how somebody handled it here. As that, whatever you want to share. Otherwise, it's going to be a long coffee break. Yeah.
And I'm going to see, obviously, we're not just people in the room. There are people on Meet Echo as well. You can interact. You can ask questions. So, yeah.
Yay, the first one.
Can I have a question?
Yeah.
I come from a different world, so if it's inappropriate, just let me know. Alejandro Fernandez, Global Cyber Alliance. I just was at a meeting in Brussels with the European TLD ISAC, which is a new project that is made, and for that community, NIS2 is an incentive for action, yeah, and for, I don't know what's the feeling in this community or in this working group about NIS2 and what is coming after that. That's it.
I think if I understood correctly, I think it's a good question what the community feels about it. That's exactly what we want to see and what we want to gather as information. I think my personal perspective, and this is not me speaking as a chair, but me speaking as myself, is in the past what happened if the community hasn't changed things and hasn't improved things, then usually somebody else came and forced, I don't want to call it improvement, but forced things on the community that were supposed to improve things but didn't. And then stuff started coming from the community because the stuff that came from outside the community was painful enough to get people moving. Yeah. That's maybe also a little bit the controversial part that I mentioned earlier. So I think it's super important that a community is part of it. And it's totally fine if everybody in the room here is like, I haven't thought about it, that's totally fine. If you all think that what RIPE NCC is doing at the moment is perfect and good, that's also perfect, fine. Then let's keep doing what they're doing. And I think the numbers are looking really, really good. The general point is we need to figure out what are we, where do we want to move things. We can't have conversations on the mailing list and saying, oh yeah, ASNs are the issue or abuse validation is the issue, but then not come and say, okay, we agree we need to do something in that area. So that's why I'm saying maybe people that have been on the mailing list are not in the room or not in Meet Echo today. But to be very blunt, we can't just complain and not do anything, because then stuff will not change and we're not going to get better at stuff. If that answers the question, I don't.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
I mean, I think, as Tobias said, and this is exactly it. I mean, NIS2 is, well, amongst many other things, going to be a lot of work over the next 12 months. But primarily, I mean, I think it's a reaction from the EU on, we don't think you're doing enough in a bunch of areas, and that is what we know. I mean, we know that's what, especially an entity like the EU, which is very fond of regulation, does. And to be fair, I'm a fan of regulation as well. But and then it's a failure. Some of it is a failure to act on behalf of the industry, on behalf of people in this building, people not in this building. Is there something, as we see clarity on national legislation, which of course is still across 27 countries, which is only a third of the NCC service region, which is a very important part, and a much smaller proportion of the NCC community, the RIPE community. But is that something that we should be discussing as a working group? Is there ways this working group can help organizations to do some of that, or to try and demystify some of the NIST, or is the answer just everyone just get ISO 27001 and let a little of your soul die every day? But these are these questions, and if we're not doing anything, then, well, there's nothing for us to say as a community where we're trying to act to do this. So
And maybe to add, you just mentioned 2701. I have heard that there is discussions about people wanting to put abuse management and abuse work into the certification process as well for ISPs, for hosting providers, or for telcos. So there is also some movement, and I'm not sure. You know, my last experience with that certification is 20 years old. But you know, if that's going to come, then it's going to be painful for a lot of companies right away.
I mean, how many people in this room reckon that the organization they work for is going to be considered important or essential under NIS2? How many people know what NIS2 is? Okay, that's a little better. So yeah, NIS2 is the set of regulations the EU is coming up with, having realized NIS1 was vague at best, around important and essential institutions, around reporting, around good security, compliance, and practice, really aimed at crucial industries like, you know, energy and power and things like that, but also DNS operators, also research institutions, also a whole big gray area. But I don't want to get too much into a NIS2 conversation, but it's an excellent question, and thank you for raising it. But it does bring up all of this, because if we're saying, as a community, we're happy with this stuff, okay, we hope other people are happy too. If we're saying as a community we're not, and there seems to be a persistent kind of grist in the mill on people going, well, it's not good enough. Well, how do we improve it to a level that we as a community are happy with? Because I certainly don't want to have to hire someone whose job it is to respond to a ping from the NCC to our abuse mailbox every day to say we're still alive. But there's got to be some middle ground there. Sorry, I'm talking too much.
No, that's totally fine. That's totally fine. And as we don't want to push you now today. It's really about putting the seed in and saying, okay, guys, if you have ideas or if you stumble upon things on your day-to-day work where you think this is not good, this needs to be fixed, this needs to be addressed, no matter how small it might be at the moment for you, there might be a ton of other people that run into the same issues, then bring it up. Put it on the mailing list, send it to us as chairs, so then we can facilitate, we can put it on the list, we can put it on the agenda and say, look, this is the points that we want to discuss, this is the things that we want to move forward, and then find people that want to champion those things together with the community, with NCC, or even together with third parties. You know, I think looking at NIS2 and other processes that are being done outside this community, it's always good to read and keep up to date and give feedback to those communities as well, or to those organizations as well. And I think that's one of the things that we would like to see more, and that we would like to enforce, or not enforce, but that we would like to kind of encourage more, because only then we have a way to participate in the stuff that's happening out there. Because otherwise, I think otherwise there's stuff coming that's not going to be making you all happy. It's going to be painful again, and we have seen this several times before. Cool.
I mean, I think it's easy sometimes to forget that, you know, this working group, all working groups, have the ability to directly influence this. I mean, Abusix didn't spring fully formed from the head of Zeus, nor was it address policy, nor was it was this working group who put that policy through, and created it, worked on it, reached consensus on it. And I think it's easy to forget sometimes at a meeting that this community has the ability to produce policies which affect how the internet works. You know, and I think it's easy to forget sometimes. But again, it doesn't have to be, as Toby says, it doesn't have to be about these things. It can be something else entirely different about abuse that you're like, we should talk about this. It doesn't have to be a policy. It could be the training we created. You know, that was that thing. It can be a variety of things. We've talked a lot about guides on abuse, and that kind of has fallen the wayside. And I think that there's other bodies doing better, but or doing more things. But yeah, anyway, we don't want to belabor the point.
Yeah, think about it and then let us know. We're looking forward to feedback, and then we're gonna keep working from there. next RIPE meeting is happening, definitively. So,
and indeed, by the next RIPE meeting, we'll actually have legislation. The legislation we published, national bodies will have transcribed NIS2 into their own laws, and we'll all be trying to figure out what the hell it means for October 2024, and whether there are important points there that we can work on as a community. And obviously, I think groups like the Co-op Working Group will be looking at that as well. But yeah. One last moment in case anybody suddenly is by a bolt of inspiration. No? Okay. Well, there you go. So please do take this as a note. Please look at this. The slides from the NCC are up there. You know, the numbers are there, and it's not to say those numbers are a shield of steel against improvement, but the work is happening, and I think it's, you know, it's a useful discussion and useful awareness because it gives us a basis for things to improve. Am I going to go all the way up to the go on? Why not? If only to move this slide forward. Hopefully. There we go. So, speaking of all of that kind of thing, yes, Toby, it's you again. It is you again. So yes, so well, we're actually going to talk about some global abuse reporting and I think some statistics and all that.
Yeah, so sorry, I thought there's another point in between, but that's fine. Let me talk about global reporting. And now I'm speaking not as a chair, I'm speaking as a founder of the company called Abusix, and want to tell you a little bit about the stuff that we do on a global, what we call a global reporting base, and where you can come in as supporters for the whole good of the internet. So first of all, what is global reporting and why is it important? As we know, we're here in the Anti-Abuse Working Group. The Anti-Abuse Working Group is supposed to help companies that run abuse teams and abuse desks as well. That's why we do the training, how to handle abuse complaints, how to build an abuse desk as an LIR or as a registry or as an ISP, telco, mobile operator, you name it. Whoever has a customer network or customers in a specific subscriber network because usually receives abuse reports, and they need to be handled. And so, to go back a little bit in the history of that, when I started in that area, this was 1999, a long time ago, running an abuse team for a big German telco. We didn't have a lot of data because we couldn't look into the traffic that our customers did because of privacy, and thank God we were not able, and we are still not able to do this today. But to find compromised accounts, compromised machines, compromised resources, email mailboxes, servers, whatever, you need to get information, you need to get data. Usually that data comes mostly, in most cases, from the third parties, from the outside. There's plenty of companies that you might have, or organizations that you might have stumbled upon. Shadow Server is one, there's Spam Cops, there's, you know, plenty of them, BitNinja, Abusix is sending these reports as well. And so this information and this data that is being sent to abuse mailboxes all over the world is more or less the lifeblood of how an abuse desk is capable to find out what's going wrong within their network and to find out which customer is causing problem to everybody else on the internet, and then targeting those customers and fixing the problem together with them so they can clean up their network and keep up their reputation, get out of legal trouble when we're talking about copyright, and so on and so forth. So at the end of the day, an abuse team or an abuse desk is more or less a data processor, very, very similar in enterprises to security operations centers. They receive a ton of threat intelligence as well. They do their jobs. They work this pragmatically down and look at what's going to happen and do exactly the procedures that they need to do. The same is true for an abuse desk, just we're not talking about enterprise and corporate networks. We're talking about ISP and or hosting provider telco subscriber networks. And this is a very, very important piece, and it becomes more and more important. Again, 20 years ago, 24 years ago, there was maybe a handful of abuse teams all over Europe. Meanwhile, all the big companies have their own teams I would say there's at least 25 companies nowadays that have more people on staff in their abuse team than the whole abuse community was 20 years ago. So this is a growing, I don't want to say it's a growing market or a growing, it's a growing thing because it becomes necessary. And unfortunately, we haven't seen a lot of improvement in a lot of cases. So the abuse on the internet is still there. It's still happening. It's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to go away. And so why it is important, exactly for that reason, we need to inform those ISPs and telcos that something in their network is going wrong and that they should take care about that. And so global reporting was set up at the very beginning as an open source, and it's still very, very free. We're doing it for free, so I'm not going to sell you anything. We're doing this for free. We're having tools or built tools for free over the last 2 decades. Stuff like XARF, the extended abuse reporting format that has been mentioned in this working group several times. We have built at the very beginning something called the abuse contact database, which is kind of a clone of the WHOIS databases of the world to find the abuse C, because parsing WHOIS sometimes, in the past at least, was a very, very tricky thing. Still is in some cases. So we maintain a database where you put an IP address in and you get an abuse address out. So very simple, very high performing. So for people to be able to report. So as mentioned, the abuse desks need support because everybody here in the room, I guess, who runs networks, who works in companies that run the biggest networks on the planet, you guys have a ton of data about abusive behavior that is facing or that you are facing on a database. I think everybody here in the room can or have or has some examples about when somebody, some IP addresses, if it's a DDoS attack or port scans or whatever stuff it is in your companies, you see that every day. We see it every day. RIPE NCC sees it every day. So that stuff is just out there. And this is exactly where it becomes, where it becomes important. The data that might not be really interesting for you, that you might just throw away or not even look at, or think, yeah, whatever, I don't care. This is, this is nothing that I really should care. Abuse desks really care about that type of data. It's the mundane port scans, it's the mundane spam emails, it's the mundane dictionary attacks or whatever else that is happening out there that lets ISPs and their abuse desks identify compromised machines on their network. And it lets, if you are an ISP or a hosting provider, the same is true for your organization and your abuse desk internally as well. And we're talking about also, when we're talking about hosting, WordPress accounts, phishing websites, drive-by downloads, all the stuff that is happening out there that is building up the botnets over and over again. The FBI and the governments can't even turn off botnets fast enough. They're spreading faster than ever. And it's becoming a bigger problem. It's not being talked about anymore that much as it has been talked about 10 years ago or 12 years ago, but the situation on compromised accounts within a lot of networks is getting bigger, especially if abuse desks do not exist, or if an abuse desk does not get the visibility into what's really happening in their network. So that's the call for action from our side, and we'll tell you in a second on how to do it if you're interested in that. And what we can offer to make that very simple for you. But the offer or the call to action for you guys is, if you have data that you think this is really important, or this is really stuff that can help an abuse desk, whatever it is, make it available for these abuse desks. Tell them that this is happening. Tell it even to your own abuse desk. That's really important. So what's the status quo on our side? So Abusix started a while back, 25 years ago with the Global Reporting Project, more or less. Which was very simple. We had a really huge spam trap network, which we're still maintaining at that time. And we started sending emails back with a shell script at the time because we were lazy and this was the fastest way to do it. Automatically pulling data from WHOIS, figuring out who is the abuse contact, then packaging the message in some kind of weird format and sending it out to the abuse desk. And we did this at the very beginning with sponsored machines from hosting providers in Europe. And we got, I think, to a volume of about 7 to 8 million emails per day as a fun weekend project of a few dudes that didn't have anything better to do on a weekend. And so that's how the whole thing started. Abuse contact database came out of that, XARF came out of that, and so on and so forth. And meanwhile, we're running one of the biggest platforms for global reporting and are also reporting for other companies and other ISPs and enterprises that give data to us and hand that data over to Abuse Desk. And so just as an example, one of the first ones that started with us was Swisscom, which is, I guess, a name big enough to be recognized in here. And this is how a usual email would look like. We're telling, hey, this is Abusix, the global reporting project or service. We're doing this on behalf of Swisscom. Swisscom hands data to us. They don't have to do anything else. We're doing the addressing, the formatting. We're putting that stuff into XArf, which looks like that. I hope it's maybe a little bit too small, but you can find XArf as an open source project under GitHub. If you're interested in adding certain different types of schemas to XArf to report things, happy to do so. Make a pull request, and we're happy to build that into the format and into specification. But it's a very, very simple JSON format, machine readable, but also, as mentioned on the slide before, also human readable, so that even a small, tiny abuse desk with a few emails a week in a ticketing system can take care about the abuse that we're reporting. And we're starting to report these things for more and more companies. We're notifying at the moment roughly 1,000 abuse desks per day with multiple reports about stuff that's happening within their network. We're sending at the moment about 10 different event types like spam trap and botnet. In some cases, we have access to to sinkholes where we even know what malware computers are compromised with, which is very, very helpful for abuse desks to tell the customer, hey, this is a configure problem. Here's the download link to a removal tool, and so on and so forth. And we're sending on behalf of, at the moment, 10 companies, roughly 25 smaller organizations that give data to us, and we're onboarding 10 new companies at the moment, and the number is growing. So more data for abuse desks will make it better for them because they get a better view about what's really happening within their network. And so at the end of the day, this is what we call a win-win-win situation. It's a win for the abuse desk. It's a win for you because the chances that if you report that data, that the stuff happening on your network is being reduced and you see less of that crap coming to your network is there. And obviously it's a win for us because we can kind of facilitate the data and also use the data for some statistical things that we use and that we also share with the community as we have done in the past. So what's next and how is that working? How can you participate in that? What we're doing at the moment is we're reporting our own honeypot data and spam trap data. If you're interested in having us run a honeypot within your infrastructure, not your internal, but maybe in a customer network or in anywhere or form, we have our honeypots. We just need access to machinery. We set it up. We take the data as being reported. If it goes back to your abuse desk, you profit from that as well. Global reporting as a general, that's the type of stuff where if you are interested and you have data available that we can share with abuse desks all over the world, just let us know. We're happy to have a conversation to see whatever. If you have auth logs or dictionary attacks on web portals or anything like that, happy to use that data, happy to make use of that data and report that as well. The only thing is you need to more or less forward that data somehow. This is what we can have a conversation into our system. The rest is completely done by us. We're even taking care about the support as far as we can take care about support. So we can even report anonymously if you don't want to have your name on the reports, totally fine for us. And the last one, just to mention it, something that we started just recently, not so much for this community, is the typical email feedback loops. If you receive an email in your Yahoo, as an example, mailbox, and you click on this is spam, usually Yahoo sends an email back to the sender of this email and tells, hey, the recipient doesn't want to have that email. There was some weirdness in the community because the company that did these services was starting to charge people for it. And we said, no, not going to happen after 23 years. They did it for 23 years for free. And then, my opinion, did a money grab here. And so we said, look, we can do this as well. This is very easy for us. So we started taking over a ton of companies that didn't want to pay for the service. And we do it for free. So if you're interested in helping abuse desks and helping yourself maybe in that regard, just let us know. Reach out either to me. I'm available today. I have to go back tonight, unfortunately, or just send an email to support@Abusix. talk to the right people in your organization about it. And if there's any questions, please let me know. Thank you.
So indeed, comments, questions? Nope. Nothing in Meet Echo either. Nope. Okay. Thank you very much. I mean, it's great, you know. So yay! Thank you for doing it. Yeah, I'll say that much. Okay. Trying not to make bad taste jokes about giving everyone the half hour back that we stole last time we were in Rome. So any other business, folks? We've reached that time of the session. Nope. And I think the last point there is to consider, maybe even suggest now, but certainly to consider the agenda for RIPE 88, and we will be a lot further north than here. In Krakow, which I'm very much looking forward to. But if there is nothing extra, then I will simply thank the various support people, the NCC, Meet Echo, the AV folks, stenographers for their support. All of you here and remotely, and on the mailing list in the working group. And on behalf of myself and Tobias and Markus, we will hopefully see you on the mailing list as discussed, and also in Krakow in May of next year. Thank you all very much. Oh, wait, yes.
There is someone in the queue, on the Meet Echo queue.
Oh, sorry, apologies. Okay, well. Actually, so Neil, I think you've put your hand up, but I don't know if you've actually requested to get mic. There we go. Okay. Yes. You're muted, Neil. There we go. That looks better.
Is that better?
It is better. Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, good. No, I thought I was aiming for item X, or maybe item B bis.
Go back to item X. It's fine.
But I didn't get the signals in time. There's something that I'm wondering whether it's in. But I'm Neil O'Reilly. I am the RIPE vice chair, but I want to not wear that hat for this question. This is more from a small-scale domestic networker than from the RIPE vice chair. And I'm wondering whether the working group is interested in taking under its scope the collateral damage that's done to people who are at the wrong end of a power imbalance by the way the abuse management ecosystem has developed.
That's a big question for a
Wednesday. Maybe I should take it up on the mailing list, but I thought that since you had an AOB, I should put it in earlier rather than later.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's certainly an interesting question. I suppose the question I will ask you at this point in time, and maybe again a mail would be preferred, is if you would like to go into more detail by what you mean by that. I think I know what you mean, but I'm not sure everybody else does.
Well, there are a number of things that are people who are doing their own thing in their own homes, because this is where I'm coming from, find themselves obstructed in various ways by things that are have become habitual and perhaps are justified on the basis, oh, we have to do that for security. But there's a lot of badness going out there in the internet, which isn't stopped by the security measures. And there's an extent to which some of the things that are ostensibly justified by security are just punishing the innocent. And I don't think that's a good thing. And I don't know whether this working group or this wider community is the place to do something with it, but I thought I should ask the question.
Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously neither, you know, it's not up to me. I don't know if anybody.
No. But now the idea is maybe there should be some reactions.
What I'm saying is that, you know, hopefully opening that to the room, but I think a mail to the mailing list would be a good thing certainly as well, Neil.
Then I'll try to put something together, and thank you for your helpful suggestion.
Cool, thank you. Unless there are any reactions in the room, are there any hyper mega global corporations who want to make any comments or tell us all they'll be nice to Neil? No, cool, thank you very much. Oh, we have, hang on. So yeah, I am missing something about Meet Echo here. About if somebody could help me and let Michaela into the view here. I need to figure out the buttons I'm pressing do not seem to be it. Michaela, we have voice, so.
So can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thanks. Neil, I think I kind of understand what Neil was talking.
Who are you?
Oh, sorry, it's Michaela Nealon from Black Knight in Ireland. AS 39122, amongst other things. Neil might be talking about something that I think is of interest to a lot of us, but I'm not sure why he's being so vague, but I think it's the kind of thing that if he could articulate more clearly on the list and provide actual specifics, even if the specifics are more a case of company X and company Y rather than saying, giving a particular company's name, it would be helpful, because I have an understanding of what he's talking about, but it might not be correct. You have an understanding of what he's talking about, and again, it might not be correct. It would be helpful to understand exactly what he is talking about. But the problem, I suppose, is going to be understanding where we can best articulate that. So, you know, it's like, if, for example, you're saying, okay, company X on their network is using technology Y, and for some reason or other there's an issue with that technology, whatever that technology might be, getting the company to change that's going to be an uphill struggle. If it's a case of another company outside the network is doing something in the name of quote unquote security, and the impact is that people can't actually buy tickets for events, which is what we're seeing happening, then, you know, that's something that I would love to see a way of resolving sanely. Again, companies are entitled to protect their networks, but I think, you know, there are issues with collateral damage at times, and really understanding who to address that to in some cases is hard. Thanks.
Okay. And you're still muted, Neil. There we go.
Oh, good. Same button, just re-click twice. Thanks to Michele. I should probably follow up with him first and get some help on articulating this. The sort of second level question is, even if it's articulated, how feasible is it to address, and what's the best way to do that? And that's a next level problem.
Absolutely. Yeah, but I think let's start the conversation and see if there is something that can be done or discussed.
And as Michele says in the chat, I know where to find him. Yes, indeed. Thanks. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you. There's three Irishmen talking to each other, one of them in Rome, two of them in Ireland. The glories of the internet. Okay, folks, I think in that case, seeing nobody else in the queue, again, thank you all very much for your time today. So yes, you do have a nice lead into lunch, and enjoy the rest of the meeting. Thank you all very much.